Hello and welcome. I'm Rachel Patterson. I'm a witch and a published author. My pathway is quite varied, miscellaneous if you like. Started with Wicca, with the 3 degrees and gaining my High Priestess title, but I have wandered, possibly aimlessly, but I have wandered off in all sorts of different directions. The first was probably Hedge Witchcraft, ending up probably, if you want to give me a label, as a kitchen witch. I take bits and pieces from all kinds of pathways. The bits that I find that resonate with me, that work with me, I add to my own pathway. So definitely miscellaneous. Or as someone at one of my talks once said, I'm a cocktail witch, which I quite like the idea of. So a talk today, I did ask lots of people what they would like me to talk about, and the subject that came up most was magical herbs and foods, which is, as the saying goes, right up my street. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Every single plant, every single tree, every single natural item really has a magical energy to it. It's all got a spirit. It's all got the energy that you can tap into. It doesn't matter whether it's a flower, a herb, a tree, a pebble or a shell even, and all the items that you find in your kitchen. So pasta, rice, seasoning, it's all got that magical spiritual energy that we can tap into. And you can use that energy for magic. You can eat the edible items to imbue the magic into you. Or you can work with the other items within spell work, which we will cover. So intuition is a big part. That is something that I push all of the time. Trust your intuition. If something feels hinky, it probably is. If it feels right, go with it. And that, I think, goes for working with any of the magical herbs or the foods as well. There are lists on internet, in books, in my own books, of correspondences, and they are brilliant for a starting guide if you want to specifically look something up. But I would absolutely encourage you to open your kitchen cupboards, to open your magical cupboard, to look in the garden, to look in nature and see what items jump out and work for you. Because we're all different, so what works for you for something might not work for someone else. I like cinnamon. I work with it a lot, one of my real go-to spices, and I tend to put it in every success spell, but it might not necessarily work for you for that. You might prefer to use cinnamon for love. Entirely personal choice. Go with what works for you. Each plant, along with having its own energy, and when I say its own, even plants that are exactly the same, so tulip 1 sitting next to tulip 2 will probably have a similar energy, but not necessarily the same, because each individual plant will have its own unique personality. Some of them are grumpy. Not all of the plants will want to work with you. Trees, I find in particular, trees have a real slow kind of energy, mostly because most of them have been growing for quite a few years. They are wise, they are ancient, but not all of them want to be hugged. So just bear that in mind. Sometimes you get a non-hugging tree. Approach the tree and ask, basically, if you're alright to make a connection with it. If the answer is, if you get that hinky feeling, if the answer's no, or if you get that feeling that it doesn't feel quite right, move on. Same with plants. You can also get messages from them. Trees, plants, anything that's natural will quite happily share generally its wisdom with you and its knowledge, but they might have messages for you. If it's a house plant, it might have the message for you that it needs watering or repotting or a bit of plant feed. So it's kind of a dual purpose here. You can work magically, it can help you, but you can also help it. So listen and trust your intuition. Each plant also is generally associated with one of the 4 elements. They will have an earth, air, fire or water element to them, and you can work that into your magic as well. and most of them are associated with a particular planet. So if you're into planetary magic, then you can use herbs and plants that are associated with the planet that you want to work with. Big scope. And most plants have more than one magical property. Some of them have a whole list of intents that you can use them for. But what do you use them in? It's sport of choice, really. Only limited by your imagination. Loose incense blends, herbal teas, scented oils. You can make petal beads or bookmarks. You can dress candles with them. You can make spell pouches, add them to witch bottles, sprinkle them over your candles for candle spells. You can make circlets out of flowers and greenery. Poppets can have herbs stuffed in them. Envelope sachets, which are like a medicine pouch, but literally just using an envelope to put all the stuff in. Smudge sticks. I tend not to use white sage, which I know is the traditional for smudge sticks, but it doesn't grow in the UK. It's not a natural plant for the UK. So I use whatever's in my garden. I use green garden sage. It does smell different. It smells like a roast dinner, actually. But I usually mix it with whatever I've got. So lavender stalks work very well, and rosemary. Bind it all together. Not only have I used the herbs from my garden, which are free, but it's also got my own personal energy, and the energy because they're grown in the country that I live in. Where to get them from is, again, up to you and your budget. If you have a garden, I've got a tiny garden on the edge of a city, but I pack as much into it as I possibly can. Plants, flowers, I don't really have space for trees as such, but I grow everything that I possibly can in there. But I also have a full kitchen cupboard. You don't have to buy your herbs from specific magical suppliers. You can if you want to, but herbs from the supermarket are absolutely fine. If you've got a local Asian supermarket, they are absolutely brilliant for bulk buying big bags of herbs and spices at really sensible prices. Local farmers markets, grocery stores, buy them where you can get them and what you can afford to buy. I would encourage you not to buy from the other side of the planet. If you've got an item that's on a list of spells that you want to work with and you don't have it, and you would need to order it and have it flown across the planet, then let's think about the eco side of that. Not friendly, and also expensive. Use a substitute. It's the kitchen witch theory. Use whatever you have to hand. Use what's local to you, and use what you've got and what you can afford. There are always items that can be substituted for other ones if you are following a particular spell. And I would encourage you to actually make the spell your own by using your own individual ingredients. It makes it far more personal. But go with your budget, go with what you've got. I dry everything from plants. It doesn't matter whether it's the flower, the petals, the leaves, the seed heads, the roots. I dry everything. Nothing fancy. Just lay it all out on kitchen towel on a tray and put it in my conservatory and let it dry, and then I store it and label it. You can forage as well. Don't forget weeds. Weeds are just as magical as anything else. Collect whatever you can from out in the wild. I would just make a point though, if you are harvesting out in the wild, please make sure you've identified it properly. There are some real nasties out there. Sometimes even the sap is quite an irritant, and a lot of the wild plants are quite toxic. So make sure you've identified it properly. And leave enough. Don't take the whole plant. Don't rip the whole thing out by its roots. Just take a small piece, enough for your own need. Ask the plant first and thank it. Take just enough for your needs, but leave enough of the plant so that it can continue growing. Not just for other foragers, but think about all the wildlife that survive by eating all the seed heads and the fruits and things on the wild plants. So just be sensible about it, really. As for food, well, that's a whole other matter. You buy that in the supermarket. No, actually, I buy it from farmers markets, from local suppliers, from greengrocers, from your local butchers. They will know the source of it, and you will be supporting local suppliers. If you can grow your own fruit and vegetables, then absolutely fantastic. I unfortunately don't have enough space in my garden to grow anything other than herbs, but I do, again, pack as much in as possible. Even if you've just got a windowsill to pop a couple of pot plants with herbs in, it's a start. You can work magic with any of the ingredients. Whether you're cooking a meal for your family, you can work the magic into it, or whether you're actually working a spell and you want to put food type ingredients into it. The magic is there however you use it. Particularly with food, you can work magic into stirring clockwise to bring positive energy in. To rid of negative energy, you stir anti-clockwise. Peeling your potatoes, peeling your carrots. As you peel, visualise negative energy coming off of the vegetable, washing down the drain. Chopping is quite a good way of getting rid of negative energy, but please be careful, don't be overzealous when you do your chopping. We don't need chopped fingers. You can also eat seasonally. Now this is quite a big passion of mine, really. I think we used to eat with the seasons. Even, I'm of the 70s and 80s when I was a child and all of the new-fangled frozen ready meals came in. But my dad always had an allotment, so we ate fruit and veg seasonally. And it tasted better. If you buy seasonally, not only are you going to get a better price, because seasonal produce is always cheaper, it will seriously taste better, because a strawberry bought in from the other side of the globe, grown under a greenhouse in December, is not going to taste of anything, because it's completely out of season and it's been forced to grow. And again, you've got the whole flying across the country scenario. So seasonal eating for me is quite a big thing, and if you've got a local greengrocer or if you've got a local farmer's market, I have a veg box delivery from a local company which is absolutely brilliant. They deliver every week, and it's all fresh, and it tastes different, and it's a much cheaper way of buying it, especially if you've got a big family to feed and you have to keep an eye on your budget. Seasonal eating is definitely the way to go. You can also cook with the moon cycles. We're all familiar with the waxing full and waning moon cycles. You can tie your eating in with that. There are different foods that are associated with those different phases, so you can tie it in with that as well. There's also a lot of basic foods that you can start with and then add your intent to. So anything like a pizza base, a loaf, a plain cake, a shortbread cookie, they're all bases with basic ingredients, and then you can add your flavouring in. So if you add your different flavours and your different ingredients, you add to the magic and you get your different intents. So let's look at some things. I've picked out a few things. This side, you can see behind me, that's my magical herbs and spices. That's all of the ingredients that I use in spell work particularly. I've got a kitchen cupboard with spices in as well, which I go to if there isn't anything there. It's all stored and labelled, and it's not always been out like that. I have lived with it all in cupboards and boxes and not easily accessible. But once your children leave home, you have a bit more space. So I'm going to show you some things. The first thing is cinnamon that I mentioned before. And this is the bonus of talking on a video rather than standing on a stage, because I can show you things. Cinnamon is my go-to. It's brilliant for success, but it's also good for healing, for your psychic abilities to give them a boost. Good protection, good for love, good for giving you some focus, good if you need a bit of va-va-voom, if you know what I mean. Very good for spirituality, and it also good for helping with any spell work to help you deal with changes. And if you want to give another spell a boost of power, add a pinch of cinnamon. It gives it a real power boost. It's a sun herb, so it's aligned with the sun, and it's also a fire herb, so it's got that real punch of fiery sun magic to it, and it is a very masculine herb. So it comes ground, probably familiar with these little spices jars. It comes ground, so you can sprinkle that on things. You can sprinkle it on candles, you can sprinkle it on your food, you can sprinkle it in pouches. Make sure it's not got holes in though, because otherwise you'll end up with cinnamon powder everywhere. The other one is the cinnamon sticks. Now there are two types of cinnamon stick. I'm going to try and get some of these out without tipping it all over the floor. The one that you are probably familiar with are these. They're like little scrolls of cinnamon. They smell amazing, nice to drop into a cup of hot milk. But they're probably the ones that you are familiar with as a cinnamon stick. They aren't one of the cheapest spices. They are nice for cooking. I do use them in spell work, but this is what people call true cinnamon. It's the inner bark that's dried, and as it dries it rolls up into these scrolls. So you can use that if that's the only thing you've got, or if that's what you prefer to use. I like to use this stuff, and it's called Cassia. It's still cinnamon, but it's from a different cinnamon tree. It's actually sold in Asian supermarkets. That's where I get mine from. Big bags of the stuff for silly cheap money. It's considered a kind of cheaper, lower grade ingredient to all the foodies, but for magic it's absolutely brilliant because it's cheaper and it's quite robust. You could write petitions on it, you can break pieces up and burn them. It's absolutely brilliant stuff. It really is a piece of bark, but it's so much cheaper, and if you get through a lot of the stuff like I do, that is my recommendation. It has exactly the same magical powers as the usual cinnamon. And I've got a little dog here, so if you hear anything, it's just the dog. So that's my go-to for Cassia. Use Cassia instead of cinnamon. I use it in all my magical workings, and it is so much cheaper, but exactly the same magical properties. So that's that. This one is from my garden. This is camellia. These are magical plants. This is the money flower for me. And they fall off the tree completely whole. And then I just dry them. I lay them out on a tray and I dry them. And it dries as a whole flower. They're absolutely brilliant. I've got a jar for them there. You don't have to pick them. They just drop off and then I dry them. Now, camellia is brilliant for, say, it's the money flower for me. It's abundance, it's prosperity, but it's also really good for spirituality. Associated with the moon and with water, it's a very feminine herb. So if you've got a camellia tree near you, watch out for the flowers that fall off. Complete freebies. I wanted to show you quite a funny one here. If anybody grows antirrhinums or snapdragons, they're an annual flower. But when the seed heads dry, they dry like little skulls, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to see them there. It's a bit fuzzy. They actually look like little skulls, alien skulls. So if you've got snapdragons, remember to collect the seed heads. For me, I mean, snapdragon has its own magical properties. It's very good for protection, it's very good for purification and working with fire magic. But for me, it's also very good for death and rebirth because of the whole skull look thing that it's got. I think some of the seed heads on plants are absolutely amazing. So make sure when you're collecting flowers to leave some still for the bees, obviously, and to look nice. But leave some for seed heads too, because some of them are absolutely fantastic. Another one that I like to use is oranges. When you pick your, got a box full here, when you pick your oranges, I sliced them. We've all got a few fruits in the fruit basket that nobody actually eats. just before they actually go really squishy, just slice them thinly, pop them in a very low oven and dry them out. And you've got orange slices. You can string them all together and make protection charms. You can grind them up and put them in incense blends. I've got some here all in slices, and then I've got some of the peel that I'd grind it in a coffee grinder so that I can use it for sprinkling on things. Orange is brilliant. Love, happiness, very uplifting, good for generosity. Because it's a citrusy one, it's good for purification and clarity. Also good for giving you an energy boost. Orange is a sun and a fire one, and masculine energy. So it gives a real boost. It's got a real go-get-em kind of energy to it. Also good in fidelity spells, just in case you should need one. Hopefully you don't. Herbal teas are a good one to work with as well. If you don't want to mess around with herbs, or if you've got that box of herbal tea that you bought because it sounded fantastic and it actually tastes disgusting, pretty sure that some of the companies just sweep the floor and put all the bits in the tea bags. Well, that's what it tastes like anyway. But if you've got some tea bags that you don't use, Exhibit 1 tea bag. This one is actually a fennel and cardamom one. You can drink it. You can drink it to get the magical abilities from it, and that fennel is very purifying and it's very protecting and very healing. Cardamom brings love and passion and clarity, but it's also quite uplifting and it brings protection as well. So if you want the energy from that magic, you can drink the tea. But you can also use the tea bags in a bucket of hot water, and you can wipe down your kitchen surfaces or wash your kitchen floor with it, and that brings the magic of the ingredients in the tea bag and keeps it all neat and tidy and easy to work with. You can also empty the bag out and put it into your incense blends. So herbal tea bags are really, really useful. Now on to some magical foods, things perhaps that you might not have thought of. I love jar spells. So in your cupboard, if you've got any jars of things, jam, honey, pickled onions, marmite, any of those things, you can use the jars for a spell when you've finished. You don't even need to wash them out. Work with the base ingredient that the jar actually held. So a honey jar, if you've finished up the honey, just add some more ingredients to the jar if you feel inclined to, and you've got yourself a honey jar spell. Honey's brilliant for bringing things together, for keeping things happy, keeping everything sweet. I'm just going to look up in here. Quick plug. This is where I wrote it, but I don't remember it all because, there's loads of ingredients. So, honey is happiness, healing, love, prosperity, passion, spirituality, and good as offerings for fairy. So, if you've got a jar with honey in, you could work your spell using that base or for any of those intents. But here, just as an example, I have a jar of pickled onions. I don't actually like them, to be honest, but these are my husband's. But when I finish with the jar, not only have you got a nice jar to work a spell with or make a witch's bottle with, it's got vinegar in it. Now vinegar is excellent for fire magic, but it's also really, really protective. Add to that the fact that it's had pickled onions in it, and you get passion and fertility from the pickled onions as well. Both the onions and the vinegar are Mars, they're associated with the planet Mars, and fire, and they're masculine. So you've got a big old fiery punch of magic in that jar. So when you've finished eating your pickled onions, you don't even need to tip the vinegar away. You can use it as your base and make yourself a witch jar or a magic spell in the jar. Add other ingredients if you want to. And you've got a spell made from an old pickled onion jar, or pickles, chutneys, anything like that with vinegar will have that fiery protection as a base. Something now you may not have thought of as well. I'm hoping not anyway, because I do like to surprise on occasion. Peanut butter. I don't mind peanut butter. It's not one of my favourites. I prefer peanut butter cookies. Yeah, who doesn't, really? Doesn't matter whether it's smooth or crunchy, but a really good ingredient. And again, you can work with a jar of this. Make yourself a jar spell. Peanut has got a real magical prosperity and abundance energy to it. It's very masculine energy, and it's connected with the element of earth. So you've got quite a grounding energy there as well. If you want to ground after a ritual or some spell work, have a tablespoon of peanut butter and you'll be grounded, and that's it. Your tongue will stick to the roof of your mouth because that's what peanut butter does. But really good for working magic spells. So if you want a prosperity spell, eat your peanut butter. When you've got the empty jar, you can work with the prosperity energy of peanut butter. Or if you've just got peanuts, you can work with peanuts as well. They are very good for prosperity. It's the whole nut thing. Most of the nuts have a prosperity energy or an abundance energy to them, as do seeds. Particularly if you've got the tiny little seeds like sesame seeds, they're very good for prosperity as well. But there's your jar of peanut butter. That's your prosperity peanut butter jar. So work your magic with that. I never throw anything away. That goes as well for any of the ingredients like flour, rice, pasta, that bag of quinoa that we all bought when we were feeling healthy that nobody actually eats, couscous, anything, oats as well, anything that's going to soak up negative energy can be used in spell work, even if it's out of date. So don't throw away your products that you find in the back of the cupboard that are past their sell-by date. You can use them for magical workings. Flour and rice, or oats, all brilliant for making witch jars that you can put in your house to bring about protection or to soak up negative energy. Use those ingredients. So don't throw stuff away. It can all have a magical use. Spices in particular don't really ever go out of date. They have sell-by dates on them because that's what the supermarkets do. They lose their taste a little. So you might have to, if you still use them in cooking, you might have to use double the amount. But they don't lose their magical energy. So if you've got spices that have gone out of date, use them for magical workings. A lot of my stuff in the cupboard up there is items that are out of date that I wouldn't eat anymore, but they're brilliant for magical working. And the other one that I have for you, this is my embarrassment that I do use some products that are cheats. This is gravy granules. I'm sure we all use them from time to time. They're quick and they're easy. Not a jar, but in a tub, so you could still use the container when you've finished with it for any magical spell work. But gravy has its own magical properties. It's really good for bringing a calming energy. It's good for healing and soothing the emotions. It's good for healing in general, but it's also good for cleansing and purifying. It's ruled by the moon and the element of water, and it's very feminine. So it's quite a nurturing product as well. I've got you all thinking, I hope, about big piles of mashed potato covered in gravy now. See? Calming, soothing, nurturing, delicious. So gravy, think about next time. Gravy granules you could use in magic pouches and witch bottles and things. Just make sure they don't actually get wet because that would go a little bit soggy. But you can use gravy and eat it as well to take on all of those magical properties. Now these are actually chicken gravy granules. Didn't look that up. We'll look that up. You can get beef ones as well, obviously. But meat has its own magical properties as well. So chicken has magical properties: healing, divination, prosperity, luck and fertility. So that's all in that tub of chicken gravy granules too. So it doesn't matter what's in your kitchen cupboard. It doesn't matter what items you have. You can pretty much work magic from any food item or any herb, any plant, even if there aren't traditional magical properties listed for them, because we all grow plants that aren't on the list of usual ones. Come up with your own. I grow quite a lot of clematis in the garden, but they don't really have a traditional meaning. So I tend to use them for spell work where I want to reach a goal, because the clematis is a climbing plant. So it's reaching up for your goal. So I use it for that magical purpose. I've got some astrantia in the garden which don't have any traditional magical properties. But the plant's really otherworldly, so I tend to use it for otherworld connections. So trust your intuition and go with it. Also with colour magic, particularly with plants and flowers, roses is a good example, really good for love, obviously. But Rose has got, actually it's got a huge, I'm going to pick up another book here, Rose has got a huge list of magical properties. It's one of the good all-round plants. But you can also use it for colour magic. So Rose is love, psychic powers, healing, luck, protection, peace, mysteries, knowledge, dreams, friendship, death, rebirth, abundance. So pretty much everything. But you can work with colour magic with Rose. So I would use red rose petals for passion and love, pink ones brilliant for friendship, yellow for happiness, white for peace and purification. That goes along with any of the flowers. If all you've got is a dandelion, yellow, use it for happiness. Everything, absolutely everything has got a magical meaning or a magical use, and if you can't find it in a book, I'm just flipping through here to pick some out for you. So dandelion, if you can't find it in a book, make up your own. But dandelion is wishes, obviously, divination, love, abundance and psychic powers. So absolutely everything natural. Stones and shells as well, pebbles are brilliant because they've got earth energy, and generally if you find them by a river or on the sea, they've also got the element of water with them as well. A stone can be made into any kind of spell, and shells as well. They're good because they've got the connection to the sea, so emotions, and any kind of water magic. But use whatever you have to hand. It really doesn't matter what you've got or what you haven't got. I would highly recommend going with your intuition and working with whatever you've got, to hand. There's such an array of stuff. Use whatever works for you. It shouldn't. I don't believe witchcraft should cost a lot of money, especially not spell work. If you're making a medicine pouch or a spell pouch, I like to use the little organza wedding favour bags. You can get them quite cheaply, but if you haven't got that, use an envelope. Pop all your ingredients into the envelope. You can draw magical runes or whatever you want on the envelope as well to add to the magic. Use all the jam jars and the pots that your food comes in as spell containers, as witch bottles. Tin cans. If you've got a tin of beans, beans have got magical ingredients. They're really good for abundance, but also grounding. Looking them up again. But use the tin. They are bean. Wisdom, divination and prosperity for the bean. Use your tin of beans. And if it's got tomatoes, you've got love and passion thrown in there as well, if it's in tomato sauce. But use the tin as a carrier for your spell to put it in. Use what you've got to hand. It really doesn't matter. You've got to make the magic work for you and for your pocket. So next time you're in the kitchen, have a look in your cupboards and see what magical properties you would assign to any of the items that are in there. Next time when you're thinking about throwing that packet, that jar, that box, that tin into the bin, have a think about what magical use you could put it to. Let's do a bit of recycling in here as well for spell work. Empty boxes, even toilet roll tubes, the inner bits, make good carriers for making spells. You just put all the bits and pieces inside and seal the ends. If it's a toilet roll tube, you can bury it as long as the ingredients are all biodegradable as well, and then it will work its magic under the ground. I also like to work with mandalas, and you can make those with herbs, leaves, seeds, pasta, rice, fruit, anything you want to. Start with a centre, something in the centre, and then make a pattern Follow your intuition, don't plan it out, and use the herbs and the fruits and the flowers and the seeds, anything that you are drawn to make a pattern. And then your spell's done, it's set. If you're outside, you can leave it outside for the wind to blow away. If it's inside, you can leave it for as long as is practically possible, or as you feel that it's needed. And then your spell's done. You can do divination with flowers and plants. You can make yourself a divination set with seed heads, shells, pebbles. You can scatter herbs onto the top of a dish of water to do some scrying with. Use your imagination and the items that you've got to hand. And that's about it really for now. Use it all, whatever it is. Raid your cupboards, raid your spice cupboard, raid your herb cupboard, raid the garden, raid your local area for weeds and plants. Magic is in everything. It just needs to be directed by you. So make use of everything, and just keep it. It comes from within here. So trust your intuition and work your magic. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening.